You know that incredibly specific, deeply frustrating feeling of lying in bed at like 2 in the morning.
Oh, absolutely. It's the worst.
Right. Your body is just completely physically exhausted. You can feel the heaviness in your bones, but your mind is, well, it's running a marathon.
Yeah, totally running a marathon.
You're racing with these what ifs about tomorrow's meeting or obsessing over a slightly awkward conversation you had, I don't know, 3 days ago. Or you're just staring at the ceiling, scanning the dark room for some kind of vague, looming judgment.
Right, because the physical machinery is practically begging for rest, but your cognitive machinery is just stuck in overdrive. It's basically treating a quiet bedroom like an active war zone.
Which is such a universally relatable experience for all of us. And honestly, in those moments, it can really feel like your brain is fundamentally broken. So today we are doing a deep dive into a huge stack of sources: clinical psychology articles, evolutionary biology papers, neuroscience studies, to figure out exactly why our minds do this.
And it's a lot of material, but it all points to the same underlying truth.
Exactly. Our mission for this deep dive is to uncover exactly why your brain is biologically wired to fixate on the negative. We want to know how this ancient mental machinery misfires so spectacularly in the modern world, and most importantly, what practical science-backed steps you can actually take to reclaim the present moment. So, okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even start?
Well, I mean, we really have to start by establishing a completely different baseline for human brain function. When you are lying awake ruminating, the critical thing to understand is that you aren't broken.
Wait, you're not. It sure feels broken.
I know it feels that way, but you are operating exactly as designed. The human brain, it was built for survival, not for happiness.
Right. And when we look at the evolutionary pressures that shaped us, that distinction makes perfect sense. I mean, for our ancient ancestors roaming the savannah, the consequences of positive and negative events, they weren't equal at all.
No, not even close.
Like if you missed out on a meal or missed an opportunity to mate, that was bad, obviously. But it was a temporary setback. You could just try again tomorrow.
But if you missed a predator hiding in the brush.
Right. That was final. Game over.
Exactly. So evolutionary pressures ruthlessly selected for brains that over-indexed on the negative. Because, well, paranoia basically kept you alive.
Which is fascinating when you look at the neuroscience study from Swarthmore College we have in our stack today. When researchers map how the brain processes these inputs today, they find that positivity and negativity aren't just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, that's the evaluative space model. It's such a cool framework. For a long time, we intuitively thought of human emotion like a single volume dial. Turn it up for happy, turn it down for sad.
Like single spectrum.
But the neurological testing proves that positivity and negativity are driven by entirely separate parallel biological subsystems.
And because they are completely separate systems, they don't play by the same rules, do they? They don't carry the same weight.
Not at all. They operate with this really clear asymmetry. And to prove this, researchers use a very strict methodology where they ensure the positive and negative stimuli they test are perfectly matched in baseline intensity.
Like using money, right?
Exactly. And every single time, the negative stimulus hits harder. Psychologically and neurologically, losing $10 triggers a significantly more intense reaction than gaining $10.
So if you think about it, the brain is essentially a car where the negativity brake is hypersensitive. It just slams to the floor at the slightest touch. But the positivity gas pedal, that requires a tremendous amount of effort just to get the exact same level of response.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. The activation function for the brain, the curve for negative information, is incredibly steep. What's fascinating here is that when scientists measure the brain's electrical activity using event-related potentials, they can actually watch this happen in real time.
Oh, wow. How fast are we talking?
Within just 1/10 of a second, 100 milliseconds after you see a negative image, a specific brainwave spikes. It's called the P1 component.
100 milliseconds.
Yeah.
That's barely enough time to even register what you're looking at.
Right. This shows that our earliest, most primitive attentional processes are instantly hijacked by the negative. It hogs the neural resources right out of the gate, and it continues to dominate the later evaluative stages too, like the LPP component.
And what's wild is that it even changes how the brain handles repetition. Usually, if I see the same positive or neutral thing over and over again, my brain exhibits what the papers call repetition suppression.
Right, you get bored.
Exactly. The neural response drops because the object is no longer novel or interesting. I just tune it out.
But negative stimuli trigger repetition enhancement.
Which is the exact opposite.
Yeah. When you are exposed to something negative repeatedly, your visual association cortex, that's the part of the brain in BA19 that acts like a spotlight for your attention, it actually ramps up its activity. Your brain doesn't tune out the bad news, it zeroes in on it with increasing intensity.
It's basically shouting, pay attention, the threat is still here.
Exactly, which is a phenomenal feature if the threat is, say, a hungry wolf pacing outside your cave.
But if our brains are biologically programmed to amplify negativity on an endless loop like that, how does this ancient survival trait turn into the very thing causing us so much grief in a modern office?
Well, to understand the malfunction, you really have to look at the smoke detector principle from the evolutionary psychiatry paper by Randolph Ness. Think about a standard smoke detector in your kitchen.
Oh, I hate mine. It goes off constantly.
Right, because the manufacturer intentionally designs it to be highly sensitive. It will literally scream at you if you simply burn a piece of toast.
Which is incredibly annoying when you were just trying to make breakfast and the whole house is suddenly blaring.
It is deeply annoying, but the nuisance of a false alarm from burnt toast is trivial compared to the catastrophic cost of a missed fire.
Right, if it misses a real fire, you die.
Exactly. And your brain's anxiety system was calibrated in the Pleistocene era. The cost of missing a real threat back then was death. So your internal alarm system is operating exactly as designed. It is hypersensitive by necessity.
This perfectly explains the concept of evolutionary preparedness that we saw in the research. I mean, it is incredibly easy for human beings to develop intense phobias of snakes, spiders, heights, things like that.
Because our ancestors who weren't afraid of those things didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes.
Right. But it is remarkably difficult to develop a natural, instinctual phobia of cars or electrical outlets, even though, statistically speaking, driving down the highway at 70 miles per hour is vastly more dangerous today than a garden snake.
Yeah, our nervous systems simply haven't had time to evolve a fear of modern machinery. This is known as mismatch theory. Our environment of evolutionary adaptedness, the hunter-gatherer era, is totally different from now. You are attempting to run ancient Stone Age software on space age hardware.
So let me get this straight. When I get a snarky, passive-aggressive email from a coworker, my brain is reacting with the exact same physiological terror as if I were being stalked by a predator.
Biologically, yes, absolutely. The threat detection center of your brain, the amygdala, partners up with your default mode network.
And the default mode network is the part that handles self-referential thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like memories and future planning.
Exactly. So when a modern stressor hits like an unresolved social conflict or abstract uncertainty about the economy, the amygdala and the default mode network get caught in this intense feedback loop. Your brain translates abstract social uncertainty into immediate physical danger.
Let's dig into that translation for a second, because a social standing was literally a matter of life and death for early humans. To a hunter-gatherer, being socially rejected by the tribe meant you were cast out into the wilderness alone. You would freeze or starve.
Yeah, social death equaled physical death.
Therefore, your modern brain desperately tries to solve the abstract problem of a snarky email the only way it knows how, which is by seeking absolute control.
Right. And according to the clinical insights from fieldwork counseling, an intense need for control is a fascinating defense mechanism. Because on the outside, it often looks like a massive strength.
It really does. The person seeking control looks highly organized, reliable, detail-oriented. They are the person everyone in the office or the family counts on.
But on the inside, the clinical research shows it feels like wearing a crushing suit of armor. It is a relentless, exhausting attempt to hold fear at arm's length.
And that anxious control manifests in deeply exhausting ways, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. It looks like over-planning, where you mentally rehearse a simple phone call 20 times before dialing.
Guilty.
Right. Or it's carrying the invisible mental load for your entire household and silently building resentment. It drives intense perfectionism and checking behaviors. Checking the logs, rereading an email 5 times before hitting send, obsessively monitoring the tone of someone's voice for any hint of rejection.
There's a great quote from one of the translated texts in our stack today. It says, "Worrying is like sitting in a rocking chair. It keeps you busy, but doesn't get you anywhere."
That is spot on. It's all driven by a profound intolerance of uncertainty. The anxious brain is demanding a guarantee in a world that fundamentally cannot provide one.
And when it can't get that guarantee, it resorts to rumination.
Exactly. The MindLift research compares it to hitting refresh on a frozen web page. Your brain genuinely believes that if it just hits refresh one more time, if it analyzes that coworker's comment from just one more angle, the error will resolve and you'll find the hidden solution.
But you never find the solution because you aren't adding any new information.
Right. The looping is fueled by cognitive distortions like catastrophizing the future or trying to mind read what other people are thinking. You are just draining the battery.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I do want to push back on this line between preparation and worry. Because, preparation is inherently valuable. I wouldn't want to walk into a major presentation without thinking through potential pitfalls.
Of course not.
So at what exact biological or psychological point does healthy preparation mutate into that toxic rocking chair of worry?
That's a great question. The boundary becomes clear when you look at the mechanics of movement. Preparation requires taking tangible action to solve a problem. It moves you forward in time and space.
Like writing the speech, practicing the slides, gathering data.
Right. Worry, on the other hand, is entirely stationary. You are mentally looping the distress without creating any physical change. But the clinical challenge is that letting go of that stationary worry feels deeply unsafe.
Because your brain thinks the worry is what's protecting you.
Exactly. The nervous system hasn't learned the difference between flexibility and danger, so dropping the worry feels like dropping your shield in the middle of a battlefield.
Wow. Okay, so if anxiety is a misfiring survival tool designed to gain control in a mismatched world, that raises a massive question about other mental health struggles. What about depression?
This is where evolutionary psychology really flips the script.
Right, because our sources propose that depression might also be a misguided attempt at survival, which completely upends how we usually think about it.
It is a total paradigm shift. There's a paper we looked at that outlines 4 distinct evolutionary theories of depression, and they strip away the idea that a depressed brain is simply a defective organ.
Let's walk through those. The first model is the social risk hypothesis. This theory frames depression as an involuntary yielding strategy. So in our ancestral past, if you lost a major physical conflict or suffered a massive public loss of status, continuing to challenge a dominant figure would likely get you killed.
Yes, so the brain forces a profound physical and mental shutdown.
It's kind of like a wolf rolling onto its back to expose its neck and stop a fight.
That is the exact biological mechanism. It signals absolute submission to the tribe, halts your own aggression, and preserves your life so you can survive the immediate threat.
Okay, that makes total sense for physical survival.
Yeah.
But what about the defining psychological feature of depression? The complete inability to feel pleasure, or anhedonia. Why would the brain intentionally cut off joy?
Well, that leads to the second theory, which is the analytical rumination hypothesis. This model suggests that anhedonia is a feature, not a bug.
A feature. How?
Because joy, socialization, and play, they're highly distracting. If you are facing a massively complex, life-threatening social problem, your brain literally cannot afford for you to be distracted.
Oh, I see.
By shutting down your desire to seek out pleasure, the brain essentially locks you in a room, neurologically speaking. It forces you to engage in intense, uninterrupted analysis until you figure out what went wrong.
Wow, so the misery is an enforced focus mechanism. That is wild.
It is.
And then the third theory connects to our physical health, the pathogen host defense theory.
Right. This is where we see a direct link between psychology and the immune system. The physical symptoms of depression, the profound lethargy, the desire to hide under the covers, the withdrawal from social contact, they perfectly mimic sickness behavior.
Sickness behavior, like when you have the flu.
Exactly. From an evolutionary standpoint, when you contract a severe infection, your body needs to conserve every single ounce of energy to fight it off. By withdrawing socially, you also quarantine yourself, avoiding the risk of infecting your family and kin.
Wait. So when someone is suffering from severe burnout and their instinct is to ghost their friends and just hide in bed for days, their brain might literally be misinterpreting modern psychosocial stress as a physical infection. It's trying to quarantine them to protect the tribe.
Precisely. Because chronic severe stress triggers inflammatory markers in the body. And the ancient brain responds to inflammation with sickness behavior, regardless of whether the source is a literal virus or just an abusive boss.
That is mind-blowing. Okay, what's the fourth theory?
The fourth is the bargaining model.
How does bargaining factor into a complete shutdown?
Well, in a tribal setting, if you are truly overwhelmed and cannot survive on your own, you need the tribe to invest their resources in you. You need help.
Right.
But words are cheap. Anyone can just ask for extra food. The bargaining model views severe depression as a costly, impossible to fake biological signal of genuine need.
Ah, like a distress flare.
Exactly. It's a flare that forces the social group to recognize the crisis, step up, and provide the social investment necessary to help you survive.
So what does this all mean? When you look at anxiety and depression through the lens of these four theories, it completely changes the conversation. If depression and anxiety are just these ancient conditional adaptations, does that mean we shouldn't view them as broken brains anymore?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, adopting this evolutionary perspective has profound clinical implications. Most importantly, it removes the heavy burden of shame.
Because it's not a personal failure.
Right. When you are suffering, instead of asking, what is permanently broken inside of me, you can ask, what was this mechanism originally designed to do? It transforms the distress into a legacy of your ancestors' survival instincts. We are just dealing with overzealous bodyguards.
I love that. Overzealous bodyguards trying to protect us with a manual written 100,000 years ago. It takes the self-blame entirely out of the equation.
It really does.
But of course, intellectualizing this, knowing why your brain is hitting the panic button, doesn't automatically stop the physical sensation of overthinking at 2 in the morning. How do we actually update the software? We aren't doomed to suffer just because we have evolutionary baggage, right?
No, absolutely not. We have the massive advantage of neuroplasticity.
Right, the idea that the brain can rewire itself.
Exactly. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time you indulge a rumination loop, you dig that neural pathway a little deeper. But the reverse is also true. Deliberately practicing alternative responses strengthens new, healthier pathways.
And the cognitive behavioral insights in our stack offer 5 actionable steps to interrupt the brain when it's caught in that threat loop. Let's walk through those mechanisms because they're incredibly practical for you to try at home.
Let's do it.
So step 1 is shifting your attention to your physical body.
Right, because rumination lives entirely in the abstract. It projects into the future or obsessively replays the past. By intentionally focusing on the physical sensation of, say, your feet on the floor or the air moving through your lungs, you forcefully pull electrical activity away from that default mode network.
You route it into your present moment sensory network.
Exactly. You ground the brain in the now.
Okay, step 2 is labeling the thought to create psychological distance. So instead of thinking, I am going to completely fail this project, you mentally rephrase it as, I am having the thought that I am going to fail.
Yes, that tiny linguistic shift creates a buffer between your identity and the software program running in your head.
It makes a huge difference. Then step 3 is critical for the physical stress response. Move the body.
This is so important. When your amygdala perceives a threat, it dumps stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream to prepare you to fight or flee.
But if you just sit there worrying in your rocking chair, those chemicals stagnate.
Right. Physical movement physically processes those hormones and resets your emotional circuits.
Step 4 is to write the thoughts down, which makes sense because externalizing the anxiety onto a piece of paper gets it out of the echo chamber of your skull. You can look at the fear objectively instead of letting it bounce around in the dark.
Exactly.
And finally, step 5 is introducing a balanced thought. But I want to be really clear on how this works because honestly, it can sound a lot like toxic positivity.
Oh, we definitely want to avoid that.
Right. Like, if I am terrified of giving a presentation, does step 5 mean I have to stand in front of a mirror and lie to myself? Do I have to say, this is going to be the greatest presentation in corporate history?
No, definitely not. Because if you try forced positivity, your brain will instantly reject it. The negativity bias we talked about is far too strong and sophisticated to fall for a lie.
So what is a balanced thought then?
A balanced thought isn't overwhelmingly positive. It is simply realistic and neutral. Instead of the catastrophic assumption this presentation will be a disaster, you shift to, I don't know exactly how it will go yet.
You just honor the uncertainty.
Exactly. By acknowledging that the future is unwritten, you stop fighting the uncertainty. And when you stop fighting it, you signal to the amygdala that it doesn't need to mount a defense. You prevent the threat response from escalating.
That neutral grounding connects directly to the clinical concept of flexible safety from our fieldwork counseling source. Because the goal here isn't to stop caring, right? We don't need to completely abandon our standards or quit preparing for our jobs or stop being reliable people.
No, not at all. Flexible safety is about building a wider range of responses. We have to learn how to care about outcomes without gripping them so tightly that they crush us. We have to teach our nervous system that flexibility is not a synonym for danger.
It's about recognizing that suit of armor you've built, appreciating that it served a purpose, but loosening it just enough to realize you don't actually need to wear it to bed.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. You were walking around with a brain that is biologically biased toward the negative to keep you alive. That ancient survival software struggles to process modern, abstract stressors, which leads to the illusion of control and endless rumination. But the anxiety and depression you experience aren't signs of a broken machine. They are evolutionary defense mechanisms.
Right.
And by utilizing neuroplasticity grounding in your body, creating distance from your thoughts, and practicing flexible safety, you can slowly train your brain that it is safe to put the armor down.
And there is one final detail from that Swarthmore neuroscience study that brings this entire discussion full circle.
Oh, what's that?
The researchers discovered that the negativity bias is actually not identical across the human population. It operates as a highly stable individual difference.
Meaning some people are just naturally more negative.
Yes, some people are born with a naturally high negativity bias. Their internal alarms are wired to go off much faster and louder. Others have a naturally lower bias, requiring a lot more stimulus to perceive a threat.
Interesting.
And interestingly, the study found males tend to exhibit a slightly lower bias on average, which is potentially linked to prenatal testosterone exposure. But the variation itself is what's truly profound.
How so? Why does the variation matter?
Well, consider this from an evolutionary standpoint. What if the variation in our anxiety levels is a feature for the species, not a bug? Think about an ancient human tribe.
Right.
If every single member of the tribe had a very low negativity bias, the whole group would happily march into a dark, unexplored cave and just be eaten by a bear.
Right. That's the end of that tribe.
But on the flip side, if every single member had a highly sensitive negativity bias, the tribe would be too paralyzed by fear to ever leave their camp to hunt, and they would slowly starve.
So surviving tribe required a mix.
Exactly. They needed a mix of temperaments. They needed some less biased explorers who were willing to take risks and push boundaries, but they absolutely required highly anxious lookouts to constantly scan the horizon, anticipate danger, and protect the group from threats the explorers were ignoring.
Wow, that changes everything. If you are someone who struggles with overthinking, if you're the one lying awake in the dark running through worst-case scenarios, what if your anxiety isn't a personal flaw? What if you were simply the lookout on the watchtower? You are providing an ancient biological service for the rest of humanity.
It fundamentally shifts your relationship with your own mind, doesn't it? You aren't broken. You are just carrying out the job evolution assigned to you. The challenge isn't to fix yourself. It's simply learning how to clock out when your shift on the watchtower is over.
Clocking out. I love that. So the next time your mind starts racing at 2 in the morning, try to observe your overzealous bodyguard with a little more compassion. Remember that you are just experiencing ancient software. Try to ground yourself in the physical moment and practice finding that flexible safety. Thank you for joining us at this deep dive. Now, clock out and get some sleep.